Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Um, Thanks for joining this webinar today. I know a lot of people will be trickling in the minutes past 3, but thank you for joining. So today's webinar, hosted by WashWeb, is on building partnerships for an improved WASH data ecosystem. We have a great host of featured speakers today, joining us from all over the world. And we're really excited to host you with this webinar. So thank you again for joining today's webinar on partnerships for improved WASH data. We have different speakers from the following organizations: Baseflow in Malawi, RWSN's Data for Action Group. We have a representative from the government of South Africa, executive director of the Uganda Water and Sanitation Network, and also a representative from the World Health Organization. So who are we as WashWeb? We are a dynamic bottom-up initiative that are trying to build communities at the intersection of data and WASH. And how we aim to do that is by facilitating discussions on different topics related to social justice, using data better, whether that's existing data or creating new data or creating connections between data. We like to foster conversations on systems thinking and how we can connect different systems. The 4 Ws, so who's doing what, where, and when are they doing it. And we're also really welcoming to new ideas. So if you have any ideas that WashWeb can tackle, either in an event or in a webinar, or that you'd like to discuss, please feel free to reach out. To give you a small introduction as well, WashWeb is led by Nick Dickinson, who's also in the call today, and who will lead the Q&A at the end. And my name is Merel Lauwen, and I'm the WashWeb coordinator and will be hosting today's session. So WashWeb's vision is that WASH data is discoverable, useful, and representative. And what do those 3 things mean? So discoverable means that data can be easily found when an interest is shown in that particular topic. Useful means that information is traceable, it's up to date and reusable. And representative means that the information you find actually represents reality from a variety of different perspectives. On today's agenda, first off, we'll have Lars from ETH Zurich speak about open WASH data, and also invite you to a session that we're hosting collaboratively at World Water Week in August. Next up, we have a representative from the Department of Cooperative Governance in South Africa, Sandile, and he will be speaking about building public value data towards a single source of truth. Next up, we have Mutala from RWSN's Data for Action Group, who will be speaking about how they have fostered partnerships to improve WASH data. Fiona Gore will speak afterwards from the WHO on aligning to accelerate and monitoring the strength of WASH systems. Next up, we have Yunia, the executive director of UOSNet, speaking about UOSNet's own experience in how that they've created different partnerships. And finally, Muti from Baseflow will be presenting a Malawi case study to round us off. And that will be followed by a Q&A. During all the presentations, feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and we will keep track of those questions to ask our presenters at the end. But it will also be a nice opportunity for the presenters to create some dialogue in the Zoom chat as we go along. So with that, a few next steps. If you haven't already, please feel free to follow WashWeb on LinkedIn for updates on events like these or partnerships that we're building as an initiative. And if you have any other ideas about perhaps leading a discussion group or an upcoming event, you can also send us an email at hello@washweb.org to share any ideas with Nick or I. All right, with that, let's get started. So first off, we have Lars from OpenWash Data.
Thank you, Marel, for this great introduction. Can I just get a confirmation that you can see my screen? Can someone confirm whether you can see my slides? Great, thank you. Yeah, these slides are also available online if you follow along or want to click on the links that you see on my slides. I've just shared the link in the chat. The QR code you see here goes towards our newsletter where you get all the information about this community, which is all about bringing open data practices to the WASH sector. We've started this so-called Open WASH Data community 1.5 years ago. We received a bit of funding from the ETH Open Research Data Board that helped us establish this. And it's all about our vision to create an active global community that applies so-called FAIR principles to the data that's generated in the greater WASH sector. And I say greater because we're not trying to exclude people that work in waste management, international development, humanitarian aid, etc., anything that's related to WASH in a way is included here. We're not exclusive to WASH itself, but we kind of liked, and like the acronym still, so we used it. These FAIR data principles are rather technical. I'm not explaining them in detail, but people are taught the ways of dealing and working with data that then applies to them, and that has a lot of additional benefits. The mission for us, and that's for us as an educational institution, is to empower people to engage with these tools and workflows by teaching it. So we are developing classes and courses that I'll briefly talk about. It's what we call the Open WASH Data Academy. That's what we have established to address this gap or build competencies. And last year we hosted a 10-week free live online program where people were taught the R programming language. You can see the course website here. It was running over about 2 to 3 months. You can see 17 weeks. It's live, so it's not recorded. We're doing these live with people learning directly. We had about 100 people show up and 20 graduates that we're really proud of, who have all written and published final reports that you can read. So these are public. They're coming with their own data. They're using R and the tools that we teach to prepare reports and analyze the data that are then public and shared. We're doing this again. This will be this September, October. You can already sign up here if you like. The website and the dates aren't set yet, but it's again at a similar time frame. Some news, the funding that we had for the first phase runs out, and in the second phase, we are aiming to establish a data stewardship network. So it's less so about learning data science skills and analysis of data. This focuses much more on the data management perspective. How is data managed in organizations? That's what data stewardship is. Some people refer to it as data governance. And this starts in September. We have partners from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, the WASH R&D Center, who has many, many years of research data that largely remained unpublished, but we want to work with people to publish that. Baseflow Malawi, represented by Muti here today, is part of this network, and the people we work with, and Soil in Haiti, an organization that provides container-based sanitation. If you're interested to learn more about this, we are forming more partnerships. These are people that initially joined us. You can read the detailed proposal again on our website and learn a bit more about the roadmap and the activities as part of this second phase. Lastly, I would love to invite you to join Stockholm World Water Week, and if not physically, because many of us, right, cannot. I'm not going myself, but we are hosting a session, and Liz Tilley, you'll know her, most of you will know her, is going to join in person, but you can also join online, and the full access pass is free of charge. I didn't actually know that until recently. You can follow online this session if you mark it in your calendars now. Maybe you're also available. We would love to see you there. We are trying to facilitate the online discussion as well. And many of the speakers that are here today will also be speaking at that session in Stockholm. You can find the detailed speakers list and agenda from this link. Once again, I've posted the link to my slides into the chat where you could now open them, or later, of course, after we're done, to click on all the links and read the details. Now, that's it from my side. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk about the initiative and invite you to Stockholm. And I'm now looking forward to our great speakers lineup today.
Thank you so much, Lars, for the presentation. Now I'd like to hand it over to our first speaker, Sandile.
A very good afternoon, colleagues, and it's great to be here and grateful that I've been invited to have this chat, and good to see Lars still virtually. My name is Sandy Limbat. I'm from South Africa. So I usually include a slide orientating people where South Africa is, because very often people ask you where in South Africa, because it sounds like, you know, a geographical location rather than an actual country. We're in the southern tip of the continent, of 62 million people. So it's quite a massive country with a huge landmass. So I work for the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, a department that is responsible for 257 municipalities. Out of those, 205 are local municipalities, 44 are districts, and 8 metros. We are responsible for making sure that these spaces function and function very well, because everything that happens in any country happens in space and time. Space is in local spaces, and time it's over a time period. We're a fairly new democratic country in the sense that we are only 30 years. So there's a lot of issues of inequality, and a whole lot of other challenges. But I'm not going to focus on the issues of pathologies of what we have in this country, what we don't have. But what I'm going to talk to you about today in the next 10 minutes or 9.5 minutes now is just to give you an introduction of the complex government data context. But I'm then going to show you some of the work that we've done in the National Strategic Hub in recognition that data is a critical infrastructure and an asset for making decisions. And it's our firm belief that there is no decision in the world that should ever be taken without data. And very often the data is always conflated with technology, but data precedes technology. Data has always existed, from who to marry, where to go and where to graze your land. There's always been data points. So we can't only assume that data only comes because of the technological advancements that has come through, but that has allowed us, of course, to understand the data better. But then I'm going to talk about public value data ecosystem, because we believe the work that we do is almost impossible without building a robust ecosystem. So I'm going to talk to the issues of partnerships, the strategic intent, then the WASH data ecosystem, because we believe that at least what I'm going to say today is at least advance, rather than just say I'm going to advance an argument that WASH data cannot be seen in isolation. It should be seen in the context of other data sets as part of a bigger ecosystem. So currently, let me see, Zoom is covering some of my slides. So the current data scenario in a South African context, and I think this is applicable to other governments as well, is that there's a lot of data that's it's poorly managed or managed by external parties. There's a lack of data governance in many governments. There's poor data quality, data silos. There's a lot of data collection gaps where data is not collected. There's a lot of data bias where certain people are not available on the data or not captured in the data or represented in a negative way. There's a lack of data sharing principles where data sharing is not necessarily a default position of government. And that's why I like the conversation around open data, because that becomes very, very important. Of course, it has its own issues in terms of whose prerogative it is to open data, particularly when you're talking to government, also in relation to private sector collecting data, but yet not making it available, instead monetizing it, even though that data would be very helpful in advancing the needs of their communities. Disintegrated data storage systems, some of the very difficult issues. And then there's something called data egos that I've learned over the past 5-6 years of working with data, where people don't share the data primarily because data allows them at least validates their importance in an organization. So they feel that if they share the data and they put it out there, then their importance in the organization dwindles, as you know, they don't hold on to the data, so they don't have that power to be able to be seen as important and people coming to them to ask for data. But the outcome and the impact of the current data scenario is poor core governance. A lot of our citizens are not aware of what's going on in government, and as a result, they aren't able to participate actively in governance issues. There's poor strategic decisions because decisions are not made on data. They're mostly made on instincts, and at times political sentiments, and at times depends on the community's capacity or power to lobby. So they will get better resources, they can lobby, but it's not really on the needs-based approach that is data-driven, or it has its foundation on the data. Lack of evidence-based policymaking, poor resource allocation and planning, there's process inefficiencies, and we've got tons of examples on data inefficiencies, on process inefficiencies as a result of not integrating data and understanding the data the way it should be. Poor service delivery, and then of course, perpetuation of silos. So understanding the context, and I'm fortunate that I come from local government space, so going to national government, at least I was well trained in understanding some of the complexity of local government, and how such data scenario has almost immediate impact in on service delivery, as people are not able to access services. So what we then were tasked with from last year is to build the country's single source of truth, which is a national strategic hub, which will be officially launched in October, hopefully. Again, it positions data as critical infrastructure and an asset for improved governance and operational efficiencies and service delivery. Again, it goes back to the point I was making earlier, that there should be no decision made without data. And that's what we are trying to push at national government level, with all its complexity, and it's a very, very complex space, as you will understand. But we want to be able to provide decision makers with a very comprehensive view of the country, from all sort of angles and points. And you'll see some of the tools, which are, I obviously won't demo, but I'll just show some sort of screenshots of what we are building and thinking about. And of course, I challenge the colleagues on the call, especially in the WASH sector, to think about how does this data inform how WASH practitioners think of WASH as a whole, and making sure that no one is left behind in the implementation of various WASH interventions. So this is the hub of the National Strategic Hub. So please don't try and see it online, because it's not launched, so we're not allowed to publish it yet, but we will publish it as soon as it will go online, as soon as it is launched, because we work at national government. There's a whole lot of protocols that we need to adhere to. So hopefully, once we go online, so everyone will have access to it. So one of the things we have, so what we're doing I'm going to take you briefly through these tools. I'm not sure whether I have a cursor here that I can point with. Let me see. I think this can point, laser pointer. All right. So what you see here is what we're building is integrated country level data. So we're looking at every data set. And my belief is that you can't be talking WASH without talking about the demographics, the statistical demographics that's coming out at the national level. But that needs to be aggregated to local level, so you understand the communities that you are serving in terms of access to services and the needs that they have. So what we're doing is also building the national, provincial, and district diagnostic profiles that go into detail of understanding the people on the ground, some of the issues that they face from across various factors. So we're using these sort of six sort of focal areas of people development, economic positioning, integrated service provisioning, and so forth. So I won't go into detail of that. So these are interactive profiles that allow you to go drill deeper into a local municipality, a district municipality, and understand what's going on in those district spaces. This is going to be very, very important in how services are delivered in a South African context. And we're building quite a multiple number of dashboards, and some of them will include those that are focused specifically on WASH. But what we're trying to do is to overlay some of the WASH data with various other data sets, understanding the socioeconomic dynamics of the communities that we serve. And then we're building something called GovSearch, which is, I mean, I would love to have more of this conversation with you, Lash, and other colleagues around the use of artificial intelligence to extract the data sets that are sitting unstructured data that uses a combination of unstructured data and structured data. Because structured data is easy, you could build a couple of dashboards, but when you have tons and tons of reports, policies, legislation, how do you allow government officials to be able to search their data and make decisions on the basis of that information that already exists? And there's a lot of data that's created. So what we've done is to build this AI tool, which serves like a chatbot or a search engine that allows you to search data that is structured and unstructured. So that's already completed. So we're building something called One Plans, which are long-term plans for municipalities that they can plan in over a long-term period. Constantly, when we build and do what we do, we're constantly asking ourselves the so what question. So you integrate the data, then so what? And then you do these fancy looking dashboards with these insights, so what? How do you change people's lives on the ground with all the data that you are working with? So the idea of the so what question is that once we have insights that we've published, we take these insights, we go back to academia. And again, here is also an invitation to some of the academics that are working in the WASH sector and beyond to then come to us and say, what insights do you have? Out of those insights, then we start building or designing policy briefs. Those policy briefs then can be sent back and shared with policymakers and decision makers within government to say these are some of the issues that are being picked up in the data that we are working on. So that is an important piece of work for us. And it's an important question to continuously ask ourselves, so what? I think in the context of the conversation we're having today, once we've built this sort of ecosystem and partnerships in the WASH sector, so what? To what end? What exactly are we trying to achieve? So one of the last but not least projects we are trying to do is a service delivery simulator. We want to be able to say to local municipalities, you've got to simulate where there's a sanitation need, who needs this sanitation, can it be afforded, what are the sort of environmental conditions in that area, before you make a choice on the typology of sanitation, on the size of the sanitation facility that you are building, and the location of where you need this sanitation option. I'm just making an example of the sanitation within the WASH space. So very often in the local government space in South Africa, these decisions have not been made on the basis of data. So we want to drive these data-driven decisions, and ensure that every intervention is needs-based, but it's also entrenched and rooted in the data itself. So how are we trying to build this sort of public value data ecosystem? And there's a very clear strategic intent that centers partners as critical in ensuring that we support evidence-based decision-making, so we can improve more partnerships because the data is coming from different spaces. And I think the work that colleagues are doing within the WASH sector, especially trying to open the data, is really talking to these issues that if you don't open the data set, as an example, just let's choose one data set that influences how WASH should be implemented, or WASH intervention should be implemented, there's going to be a lot of issues of blindsiding. So we are building quite a lot of partnerships with stakeholders in government, outside of government, in civil society, in academia. We are trying to think strongly about how do we use community collected data to inform some of the decisions in government. In a way, I don't want to talk to the issues of open government because it has its own complexities, but we are trying to open up government in a way by opening the data that we have and sharing with our stakeholders, and also asking the stakeholders that are collecting the data and saying, how does that data fit into the decision-making processes? We are reaching out to private sector stakeholders as well that have collected a lot of data advertently and inadvertently from our communities to say, how do you help us build this sort of single source of truth that we can put this data into one and create and extract insights. Again, from there, then we want to ask the so what question. How do we build data literacy? How do we support governance issues? How do we ensure that there's operational efficiencies as a result of this sort of ecosystem that we're building? Then, of course, improving the service delivery and ensuring resource allocation. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, but I'm trying to try and I think I have just only a minute and a half to complete. So our sort of public value data ecosystem at the moment is looking at districts, provinces, some of the national departments that we are engaging with. We're starting to engage strongly with sector experts to deal with the issues of policy, policy briefs, but also bringing them in to say, point us to any data gaps. If there's a data gap that we need to look at, point it out so that we can collect the data better, because the data we are using, and it's something that needs to be acknowledged, to be honest, the data we are using comes from national statistics, and the data is often very binary and it excludes quite a number of people. How do we make sure that the data we're collecting as government or using to make decisions is inclusive, but also doesn't expose people to any unnecessary harm? We're talking to data government specialists to talk to the issues of data governance, because we want to get to a stage where South Africa, the data sharing in South Africa is a default position of the state, where you want to share the data. If there's issues of privacy, you then deal with those issues in order to share the data so we can make better decisions. We're reaching out to tech specialists to look at how do we explore and leverage on the technology that's out there to make sure that data that and insight that we develop is shared widely, but it's also accessible. It's not just shared in sort of fancy platforms that are not necessarily accessible. So we are building indexes, making sure we're building quite a number of dashboards. We will go into a space of open data, because government data is very difficult to open, but also we're asking a lot of questions in the openness of data, because if you look at our National Treasury Department as an example, they open the data, but it's all on CSV and Excel files, and there's people who cannot access that data. It's there because it's in public, you can download it, but if you don't have the skills and capacity, how do you then access that data? So this is a matrix of what we're looking at in this desire to have an all of government and all of society approach to how we think of data, and the data ecosystem itself. As I conclude, I'm hoping that I have 1 second left. It is a contention that I have that WASH is a collective responsibility. As a result of that, there is therefore an imperative, a need to ensure that all the stakeholders that have data that will influence how WASH initiatives are implemented or WASH policies are implemented, they need to be contributing to the space. They should not be left behind. And you could think of a lot of people that are not necessarily WASH experts, but they carry or they generate data that influences how we think of WASH. I'll make a very quick example as I wrap up, is an example of people's capacity to pay for data. So we're looking at, you have to look at economic data that will ordinarily not be considered as a WASH data, because it's not really, dealing with the issues in WASH, but it does affect people's affordability of any WASH intervention. So again, data is a catalyst and a foundation for ensuring operational efficiencies, not just of the, of the WASH initiatives, but generally on how the WASH institutions function. It also serves as a pillar for collaboration. Otherwise, the people in this call will not have collaborated with if it wasn't about the data itself. But it also allows us to have very robust and mutual partnerships, because we ask ourselves questions and we ask questions of each other in terms of how we contribute to each other's sectors that we are working on. In terms of equitable access to WASH services and infrastructure, that becomes important, and that's why the service delivery model for me is critical, because it says you are looking at the needs-based approach that is data-driven, so you understand where WASH initiatives are more required and more needed. Again, not disadvantaging communities that have probably low capacity to lobby comparatively to others, but also you want to support the issues of co-governance and sustainability and inclusion. The issue of co-governance, people aren't able to make certain decisions unless they understand what are the sort of current, what's the state of the world. So if you look at, I'll make an example of the urine diversion toilet. If you don't know the data around the urine diversion toilet in terms of what it does, what it can do, how do you make a decision on whether you can utilize that sanitation facility or not utilize that sanitation facility, or sanitation option and a typology? So colleagues, it's a rush, because 10 minutes is very short. Unless you are in the gym, it feels very long, but at this point it's felt very short, and I hope this has sort of resonated with some. So thank you so much to the organizers of this session. I'm looking forward to more presentations and the engagement later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandile. And I want to echo Lars's message in the chat that this is a huge undertaking. And thank you so much for your presentation. It's very, very interesting. It would be great if you could let people know in the chat how they can reach out to you or stay in touch as well. All right, so going on to the next presentation, Mutala, welcome. Thank you for sharing your screen already. You will be speaking about how RWSN is creating partnerships for WASH Data, specifically in his role as co-lead of the Data for Action theme. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you'll be finding yourself in the globe. Thank you to be here. I am Mutala Abdelmumin, a co-lead for the Data for Action team and a member of the Rural Water Supply Network. This afternoon's presentation is basically to take us through how the network is using partnership for an improved WASH data ecosystem. We all agree that data is key to the kind of work we do. And as a network, we are a global network of individual professionals and organizations dedicated to rural water supply throughout the globe. By way of establishment, the network was founded in 1992, so it's over 3 decades now, with membership of over 16,000 individuals and also over 100+ organizations. We have presence in over 170 countries, and we are very, very active on LinkedIn with over 28,000 followership. As a network, we are currently hosted by the SCAT Foundation based in Switzerland. So that is where the secretariat is. And then per the arrangement, we have an executive committee that is rotational. So currently the executive committee is being made up of membership from the African Development Bank, the Global Water Center, UNICEF, the World Bank, WaterAid, and SCAT Foundation itself. With what we do, we try as much as possible to be very inclusive, and we do our work mostly through webinars. And on an annual basis, we try to have about 8 to 12 webinars within a year. And then we do this through multiple languages because we see ourselves as a global advocate, and we don't just do our webinars in English, but we try to get people who can also speak French, Portuguese, and Spanish to benefit from the work we do. On an annual basis, like I indicated, we have a lot of online sessions, and this will normally range from 150 to 300 participants. But in February this year, we had one of the most subscribed webinars, which was organized to launch the World Health Organization guidelines for rural water delivery. And we had this in about 6 languages, and we had about 1,010 people participating from 159 countries. One of the things we try to do is mentoring. Mentoring, we know, is very key to the kind of work we do. And so since 2019, we have had over 1,359 mentors and mentees. And for the year 2023, we had about 250 participants from 66 countries in our mentoring program. We agree that as a network, we can only survive if we decide to work with others. And so, as the only global network dedicated to rural water supply, we recognize that purely focusing on our silo will not lead the change that we desire. And so, we continue to foster active alliance with other networks, partnership associations in a smart way to achieve greater outreach and impact. So you can see from my slide, we have a lot of partnerships and knowledge hubs. And for the year 2024, you see that our network extends to the UN Water, Sanitation and Water for All. We have the Agenda for Change. We have the International Water Association. We have WASH Funders Group. We have the World Bank Group, just to mention but a few. So one may ask, why are we so much interested in the rural water? Why rural water? And it will interest you to know that given the statistics from the Joint Monitoring Program, about 80%, that is 8 out of 10 people, are without basic water services. That is at the rural water level or at the rural sector level. And this translates to about 580 million people. And so this is of concern to us. And we know that at the rural level, most of the time, these are people who are marginalized, people who are poor, and people who cannot even get the platform to speak for themselves. And so as professionals and organizations, we are representing the interest of these people. We try to get to the rural water level or the rural sector to understand what their issues are, and then to create a platform for the world to get to know what is happening, and together develop solutions that will go ahead to address the situation they find themselves in. So as a network, how do we create the change we want to see? One of the first things we do is networking, connecting, and convening. And as you can see, we are currently working with the WASH Web with this webinar to reach out to a lot of people to let them understand the kind of work we do. This will be able to create a platform for people to get to know about the network, join the network, and also contribute towards the mission and vision of the network. We also believe in knowledge brokering and information hubs. So whatever we generate, it is not enough to keep it to ourselves as a network. We must reach beyond the network to get people to understand the ever-changing WASH sector, how dynamic it is, and to see how best people can tap into the changing environment to improve on the kind of vision and mission we seek to achieve. We also believe in training, guidelines, and standards. Whatever we are doing, if people don't have the required skill sets, they may not be able to impact on the society, and that will affect the kind of change we want to do. When it comes to standards, what are the standards as far as rural water supply is concerned? How does sanitation affect water services? How does hygiene affect the quality of the water we use? And based on this, we must create standards. And these standards must be something that people can look up to and see whether they are on track or not. And so the third way we try to create the change is to train people, set guidelines and standards as far as our operations are concerned. As a network, we have sub-teams that look at the kind of work we do. We have sub-teams like sustainable groundwater development and exploitation. We have subgroups like leaving no one behind and all that. And one of the key subgroups is the data for action group or team, which I happen to be a co-lead with Muti, who works with Baseflow. And one of the things we seek to achieve is the innovation in data for rural water, including harnessing emerging technologies and trends, such as artificial intelligence and machine learning. We have come to a point in our work as professionals where artificial intelligence and machine learning has become part of us. How do we make sure that we are not left out? How do we take advantage on the prevailing issues and technological ideas to be able to make things easier for our rural folks? The other thing is strengthening how rural water data is used systematically to support decision-making at all levels. Like the previous speaker indicated, data is everything, and we need data to make decisions. And before now, we have always used data in our decision-making, be it qualitative and quantitative data. So if you have to take a decision, you need data. And what is the situation? As we see, 8 out of 10 people who lack access to water are found in the rural sector of the world. And so this is data. How then do we use this data to develop solutions that will address this gap? We are marching towards 2030. Are we on track? We need data to be able to tell whether we are on track or not. And if we look at the global picture, let's disaggregate this. What is the global South doing? What is the global North doing? What is Africa doing? What is Asia doing? What is Middle East doing? All these data sets must be available. What are other people doing that we can learn from? And then to be able to bridge the gap between the rural folks and then their urban counterparts. Then we also look at identifying and developing guidelines where there is the need, as earlier on mentioned, and then supporting the harmonization of indicators, benchmarking, and open data standards. So how do we get access to data? And then we are looking at open data standards. How do we make sure that we don't breach the privacy of others? So these are all ethical issues that comes up for discussion. And as practitioners, we must all agree on the way forward. And then we see how well we are collecting data using tools like mWater, which is a free source tool that people are using to collect data, and then you can share the data. So as part of our agenda to be able to get people to understand what is happening within the WASH space, the Data for Action Group introduced or organized a webinar this year, which was around the area artificial intelligence and water management, looking at the opportunities, the effectiveness, the limitations, and ethics. And I had the single privilege to co-host this or co-moderate with Muti. And then this was held on the 11th of June. Thankfully, we had about 360 professionals across the world. And then there's a link to the recorded version of the webinar, which I would share with you all. Beyond that, there's the need for us to call ourselves as professionals and organizations to action. You ask yourself, the data we generate in our line of work, must we share it? Yes. To a large extent, people need those sets of data to also make informed decisions. So the data we require to make informed decisions in our work, how do we get that? It is true that other partners have generated a lot of data. And so with the needed partnership, we can all collaborate to see how best we can get these data. And then together, we can work to generate timely and reliable data to be able to address issues of WASH around the world. At this point, I would want to find out, are you a member of the network? If yes, thanks so much for your support and being part of this process this far. And then if you are not and you want to join, there's a link for you to be able to join the network. And if you are a member of the network, you may want to join one of the sub-teams, which is the Data for Action community. We also have a link to this. And then we are calling on everybody who wants to be a part of this, that you come together so that together we can work and achieve a lot together as practitioners within the WASH space. I work as a staff of WaterAid and then contributing my quota as a member of the network. So it doesn't matter where you work, you can still be a member of the network, and your organization can equally be a member of the network. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mutala. And thank you, Aline, for sharing those links in the chat for anyone who wants to join or continue the conversation in this way. I am handing over the floor now to Fiona Gore from WHO. I'm sharing my screen for you now, Fiona. Let me know when you want me to switch slides.
That's great. Thank you very much, Meryl. And it's a great pleasure to be here. And thank you all for your really insightful presentations so far. And it's just really exciting to know how much is going on and us coming together in this way. So I'd like to thank Meryl and Nick for inviting me to contribute to this really important conversation. I'm also really pleased to be able to share and have this opportunity to share the vision that we have for monitoring the strength of WASH systems. Many of you may have been at our webinar we organised on the 17th of June. It's a joint initiative with UNICEF in close collaboration with the World Bank. And I think it's really an exciting piece of work that we're moving towards. So my name is Fiona Gore. I work at WHO headquarters in the WASH team. I'm the team lead for the UN Water Global Analysis and Assessment of Sanitation and Drinking Water, and that's the only time I'll say that in full today. It's the GLASS in programme and the WASH accounts work, and basically a global monitoring mechanism. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of work going on WASH system strengthening. There's a lot of different organisations, and many of you are probably involved in some way or the other. And there's a lot of different definitions, a little different interpretations of what we mean by WASH strengthening. But one of the critical questions that we're putting forward is, do we have a sound agreed core set of indicators and a common monitoring and review framework that would support decision makers to monitor progress, evaluate impact, and assure accountability? Well, the simple answer is basically no. Next slide, please. And the next question is, how can we do this in a meaningful manner? Because in fact, few countries have information systems that at the national level track and monitor inputs and processes in particular, and how these influence the outputs and outcomes and impacts, and looking at this as a whole as the WASH system. I think more than ever that there is this need to define a core set of indicators for assessing the strength of WASH systems. And the feedback we're getting is that there's a huge momentum around this. And I think we all recognize that, and previous speaker mentioned it, Mutala, progress is needed to reach SDG 6.1 and 6.2. We see it in the JMP results and the latest reports. And the world is dramatically off track to reach these targets. But yet, some countries are making successfully and rapidly increasing coverage of WASH services. But then the key question that comes is, well, what are those factors that lead some countries to make progress? And some of these countries are making rapid progress towards increasing access. And why are some other countries not making that progress? So if you could go to the next slide, please. This is just to show you an example from the latest GLASS report that was published in December 2022. And we're actually in the new cycle, it's ongoing, of the GLASS 2024 data collection. And I was just with a team and the GLASS focal points from we have more than 30 countries in Africa that have committed to participate in this current cycle of GLASS. And worldwide, we have nearly 100 countries that have committed to participate. So as a parenthesis, I'm urging you all, if you're at country level, to get involved in the discussions, in the inception meetings that are taking place. And I know many of you already are and partners are, but I really encourage you all to get involved in whichever way is feasible. So, you know, I think we really recognize that, you know, countries are full, this, you know, based on the data, that there's great intentions. And as you can see here, countries, you know, many of them have a formally approved policy or a policy under revision or under development. And that's what you can see in the bottom bar. And I'm not going to go into detail, but as you start climbing up this chart, you realize that very few countries out of the totals actually have a formally approved policy and costed plan that actually have enough sufficient financial and human resources. So what's happening? Why is this? So moving on to the next slide, please. So coming back to what I was talking about in the introduction, that there's a lot of WASH system strengthening work going on. And what is the strength of the system? And I'll mention, you know, the work done by UNICEF, the World Bank, IRC, the Agenda for Change, WaterAid, UN Water, what we do as part of GLASS, that the SWA building blocks. There's a lot of frameworks, there's a lot out there. But my question to you now is, you know, how meaningful is that if we're all coming along with our different frameworks and we're not aligned behind a core set of indicators that can actually show the vital signs and what is actually going to make the needle change and accelerate progress? So moving on to the next slide, please, Meryl. We, with UNICEF, WHO and UNICEF, in close collaboration with the World Bank, are putting forward this initiative to try and help facilitate the identification of these vital signs through a core set of indicators. So we hope to steer a process for the development of this and really putting countries and governments at the core towards a common monitoring and review framework using national processes and strengthening national information systems. And the idea would be over the next couple of years just to pilot in a few selected countries, but sort of with different settings, of course, in different contexts, data collection, having a look a little bit at what is currently being done, you know, along the results change, and having a better balance and seeing where the indicators currently lie in outcomes versus inputs and processes. And then to try and have a consultation with all of you, and we encourage you all to get involved in helping with this core set of indicators that we're trying to produce. We're going to try and learn from the GLASS process. We've included some questions in the GLASS survey that's currently ongoing to try and gain insights into developing these indicators, as well as maybe mentioning some of the work that the JMP and the GLASS team are doing on monitoring climate resilient WASH and developing a core set of indicators there as well. But we're also thinking about the future, post SDGs. What's going to happen? What are the core indicators from a means of implementation, a WASH system strengthening point of view, would we want to see in a post SDG agenda? So we're really already thinking ahead, and we really are keen to get all of your experience and expertise on this. So the idea is really to support governments and partners in aligning ourselves in the establishment of a process for regular national monitoring and a review of the strength of WASH systems. Now, may that be through, you know, a joint sector review, sector performance processes, based on a core set of indicators. Next slide, please. What I want to just show to you here is what has been done in the health sector. And WHO has been working on health system strengthening for the past 15, if not 20 years. And this is an example of the Monitoring Primary Health Care, the PHE Performance Scorecard. And it's an example of a national performance dashboard for country use. And this is a dashboard that's available for individual countries and indicating and highlighting where systems are strong and where there's challenges. And as you can see, there's not a huge number of indicators here, but in a snapshot, it provides a pretty good idea. Now, what goes into it behind it is, of course, quite significant. But what the scorecard has done is identify priority areas that actually link and have an effect and have an influence. And this is, I think, what we want to try and do in the WASH sector. Next slide, please. So just coming towards the end of my intervention, what we plan to do, we have a concept note that we have developed on this work, and I will be putting the link in the chat if any of you are keen to read this. And we're currently developing more of a discussion paper where we're reviewing current frameworks that are used by different organizations, by countries, by governments, by institutions, and what indicators. Now, this may be published data or not, and we're really keen for you to contribute, and that will actually be in my next slide, our call for evidence, and we're hoping to get as much information as we can before the end of the month. In fact, the 19th of July, but we'll be happy to accept any information shared by the end of the month. I think I've mentioned that we want to ensure alignment with other ongoing initiatives, including the climate resilient WASH monitoring, but also the SDG 6 MOI review, the means of implementation, and other ongoing initiatives like the FCDO and IRC WASH Systems for Health initiative. So next slide. And in my next slide is really maybe to say a couple of words about this discussion paper that we're in the process of developing. And we're really aiming to have an overview of existing WASH system strengthening frameworks that are being used, and really taking advantage of the experience that many of you have already done in this area of work. So please share any relevant frameworks and indicators to be considered in this discussion paper. And we'd be happy to get you more involved, and I'll put a link to a listserv if you want to get more information about this. Please don't hesitate to write to me and sign up. So with that, I'll pass it back to Meryl. I believe that was my last slide. Was it?
I think so too. Yeah,
oh, great. Okay. I hope I'm on time. Thank you so much, Meryl.
Great. Thank you so much, Fiona. another really great initiative, bringing together lots of knowledge from the sector and different frameworks. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over the floor to Junia. I see you've already started, so thank you so much. Junia, I don't think we can hear you.
Apologies for that. Yes, hello everyone. Like I've been introduced, I'm Junia Musazi from Uganda. Let me first introduce Uganda. It's a country based within the East Africa bloc, neighboring Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia. Yeah. What I'm going to present to you is experience from UWASNET, which is Uganda Water and Sanitation Network, a network of more than 250 civil society organizations that was formed in the year 2000 under the leadership of the Ministry of Water and Environment, the mainline ministry that we work with, and in partnership with other members that included WaterAid, the World Bank, and Danida. The main mandate of my organization is to coordinate all the WASH implementing civil society organizations in Uganda so that they can effectively influence both policy and practice at national and local level. But we also ensure that we facilitate learning and sharing amongst the members, promote partnerships and collaboration between the CSOs, but also with other stakeholders that include government and development partners. We promote upscaling of best practice that's been identified by our members, but also strengthen the contribution of our members by building their capacity to align to different sector policies and guidelines. Our membership is made up of close to 160 civil society organizations that are spread across the whole country, like you can see in that map, where we divided the country in 10 different regional structures. I'll talk more about that in my next slides. But majority of our members are national civil society organizations, which make up 84. The international are 33, and the community-based organizations are 27 at the moment. Regards partnership, our partnership, when it comes to WASH data, we have three main pathways. Actually, there are four. The fourth one is focused more on promoting governance and accountability. But for today's session, I'll mainly focus on three. The first one, where you see the map of Uganda, here we are trying to make sure that we fulfill our mandate as the coordinator of the WASH implementing CSOs. And here we focus more on having a live database that details who's doing what in the country. Then the second pathway is when you compile our annual civil society performance report. Then the third pathway is when we contribute to the overall assessment of the country, when the country annually assesses how far we are regards attaining the water and sanitation targets as per the national and global targets. So when it comes to the national database, like I shared before, we divided the country into 10 different regions. And each of these 10 different regions are members nominated regional coordinators who oversee a cluster of an average of around 10 to 12 or 15 districts that fall within each region. So in 2019, GIZ supported the organization to undertake a physical mapping. However, we now have a live database that is informed by our district focal points, who are our representatives, who try to make sure that they're able to track and have a grip on all the implementing CSOs within their district. Then the district focal points feed this information to the regional coordinators, who then inform the national database that is managed at within the Secretariat. So the smaller map that you see here on the right, that one is depicting the database of a district. And here we can be able to tell the bigger the dot, that is the bigger the concentration of the members, the CSOs within a specific district. So this, the map on the right is depicting a region, a typical region that is comprising of around 10 to 15 districts. So if anyone wants to know which civil society organization is operating in Uganda, in any one district, this is the database that is able to inform us who is operating where, and therefore able to contribute to the dialogues or discussions regards effectively targeting services to the people in Uganda. Our second pathway is when we compile the annual WASH CSO performance report. And in order to compile this report, we have a Kobo tool that is shared amongst all our members. They can either download it on their computer or the phone. So they compile this tool, which has different indicators. The indicators are aligned to the National Ministry of Water and Environment Sector Performance Framework. So that, like I will later be explaining, so that our data can be incorporated within the national data. So the indicators are mainly around 8 thematic areas where each CSO is supposed to report regards what kind of services or investments they have put in regards water supply infrastructure, operation and maintenance of water services, sanitation infrastructure, sanitation promotion interventions, integrated water resource management, water for production, research and development, or capacity building. As we all know, many countries have the challenge of CSOs operating in a country, but you cannot be able to tell what they're doing or where. So this report that we compile annually is able to depict who is investing what and where. And on average, the graph that you see on the right is indicating that annually, for the last 5 years, the CSOs in Uganda, well, this has been increasing from 2018, where we have around an investment of around 32 billion, which is now, we have a total of around 107 billion Uganda shillings. That's an average of around 25 million dollars that are invested by CSOs annually in the sector. So this report also is able to, the members are able to share their best practice, and it also promotes learning and synergies amongst our members, but also with other stakeholders that include government and development partners. The same report is used to be integrated within the annual program performance report that is compiled by the different line ministries that include Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, and also Ministry of Water and Environment. These reports, each of the line ministries, they have national performance measurement frameworks that are aligned to other national policies that include the Vision 2040 for the country, and also the national development plans, which all have indicators that are aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. So when the line ministries compile the annual reports, they generate information from the local governments. So we, as the network of the civil society, we also generate the previous report that I've shared about, which compiles what the CSOs have invested. So these two reports are now able to inform the line ministries where we are as a country regards attaining the national targets of water sanitation and environmental conservation. And also, it's the same report that we are able to tell how far we are regards attaining the overall national targets, but also the SDGs. And it's also through this initiative that around a month ago, we partnered with WHO, the initiative that I think Fiona has shared about, where we are currently trying to align our indicators, the definition of the indicators that are contained within the National Performance Framework to be well aligned within the GLAS indicators that WHO uses to compute Uganda regards attainment of SDG 6. So I just want to conclude by emphasizing the importance of partnerships. Through the examples I've shared, the partnership between government, civil society, and development partners is quite key, because if this data is coordinated at different levels, if we, the network, we coordinate the data of the CSOs, then that way we contribute to assessing who is left behind. That way we contribute to targeting and serving those who don't have WASH services. But also, through the report that I shared that we compile as the network, we as the civil society organizations, we also incorporate the key bottlenecks that the sector needs to address. We also promote mutual accountability, because as CSOs, when we submit such a report, we're showing that as we call for government to account, we are also accounting to the services that we are providing. So in brief, the emphasis of partnerships when it comes to data is quite key. And the examples I've shared, I think, are depicting exactly what the webinar is all about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Junia, for that really insightful presentation. I would like to hand over the floor to our final speaker now, Muti. Muti is a team leader at Baseflow in Malawi and will present on the Malawi case study.
Thank you. Can you hear me? And can you see my screen?
Yes, everything works well.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are. As mentioned, my name is Muti, and I'll be giving a presentation of an experience or a case study that we've experienced in Malawi concerning partnerships for improved WASH data ecosystems. Just to give a very quick background to who I am and the organization I run. The organization I run is called Baseflow. And if you want to know a lot more about what we do, those are our details. We are on social media, since we all have to be connected. And of course, the work that we do is around trying to improve the sustainability of groundwater resources for rural populations to have access to safe drinking water. Now, how we do that is quite vast. There's a lot of stuff that we do that's connected to that. But one of the strategic areas of what we do is around improving WASH data governance, or data stewardship, as Lars mentioned a little earlier, for informed data-driven decision-making. So this is why WASH data is important to our work, because we recognize its importance in terms of decision-making. So I'm going to give an example of an experience we had at trying to bring a partnership together to solve a particular WASH data challenge. And the WASH data challenge we're trying to solve was this one. Now, the document you're looking at is what we call a National Rural Water Supply Investment Plan. Just like every other plan, this is a document that's supposed to inform where investments go and where they're allocated. So the document was supposed to be updated in 2017 after about 10 or 15 years in use. It hadn't been updated. There were previous attempts to update it using all sorts of technologies. In one case, they actually tried to use Excel, which was really dirt cheap, but that approach failed. There were other attempts, for example, to use GIS, but the consultant who developed the platform disappeared with the passwords because he wasn't paid. There were lots of attempts to try to come up with an approach to update this particular investment plan so we could know where our allocation is supposed to go. Now, a lot of this data was also locked in paper. That was another problem. A lot of this data was not live, was sort of locked in paper and was not accessible. So that was another aspect of the challenge that we're trying to solve. So the initiative for us was trying to look at building a national management information system for WASH for my country. Now, there is an M&A framework that exists. So now the issue for us was, how can we make that more accessible? How can we make that unlock it from paper and make it a national management information system that people can actually access and update? So as part of this, we're going to work with the network of government enumerators and training them in how to use mWater. And we're looking at trying to map as much as we possibly can every communal water point across the country, any latrine that's within 100 meters of a groundwater source to check contamination, as well as any waste pit that was within 100 meters of a groundwater source like a hand pump or shallow well, and so on. Now, the point of collecting all this information, as mentioned, was to look at institutionalizing that WASH database to become the sector management information system. That was the primary idea. So it wasn't just a data collection exercise, it was also looking at system strengthening within the government at all levels to ensure, to see how that platform could actually be used and updated across the sector. Now, as who were the members of this partnership? So it was quite a variety of partners that were included. We had governmental partners. So, for example, the Scottish government were financing this with in-kind support from the Malawi government through the Ministry of Water and Sanitation. We had civil society, so you can see some of them were Vision, United Purpose, now Self-Help Africa, CADCOM, and ourselves as local partners. mWater as well was a key partner in this. And we also had a private sector consultancy firm called Bowie Consultants, as well as Scottish Water, who came in to provide the project management component. So it was a variety of a wide spectrum of partners that came together to try to implement this activity. Now, what was the result? I'll just give you the highlights of what the results were, which were these ones. The exercise took us about 3 years. Of course, we took a breaks in between, but it took us effectively 3 years to map the whole country. So that's my country, which looks like a shriveled potato on the left. So all those dots are water points that were mapped. So you can see my entire country was freckled with water points of varying levels of functionality. And of course, on the right of your screen, you'll see the different aspects that we're looking for in terms of the water points specifically, and we're able to reach 120,000 water points and over 300,000 latrines. So that was the result. Now, in terms of the work that we were doing, what were some of the enablers of success? What really enabled us to achieve what we were able to achieve, which was a gargantuan endeavor? There were certain enablers that made that happen. The first one, which is very obvious, we had a shared goal of a harmonized management information system. This is something that has been a song in my country, where people want a harmonized system, but nobody actually wants to do anything about it. So, but the partners that were brought on all had this shared goal, that we want to come up with one system that the entire sector could use. But also there were clear roles and responsibilities between the different stakeholders. Like, for example, Baseflow was responsible for data quality control and also training of the 300 odd enumerators I mentioned. And the other NGO partners were responsible for logistical coordination. And there were some who were responsible for general project management and so on. So there were roles and responsibilities that were allocated to different partners. And of course, as part of that, we were leveraging individual strengths to enable this exercise to be done. And also adaptive management was how we implemented. So we're not really stringent. So speaking from our work, if we noticed something in the quality of the data that was coming in, we updated our data quality check protocol to acclimatize ourselves to the new reality. So we're not rigid. We adapted based on what we found. So these are some of the key enablers. But there were also certain areas of concern that I want to focus a lot more on, especially when it comes to working in a partnership, when it comes to WASH data ecosystems. The first one is unexpressed expectations are premeditated resentments. Now, what do I mean by that? Our focus was we focused a lot on building the capacity at local government level. And again, I was listening to Zandile quite closely about the relationships between national and local government. In my country, the relationship between local and national government is quite fragmented. In fact, the local government do not trust their national government. They don't feel they have their best interests at heart. that played into the implementation. And this was something that was very complicated for us to intervene because we saw that as an internal matter, but it did have knock-on effects. So you find that we are building capacity at local level, local government level, which is necessary because they're the ones who are closer to the villages. But national government felt that they also needed their capacity being built, despite the fact that we felt that there were other larger funders coming to their support. So there were certain resentments that emerged that we ended up actually making worse because we did not understand those internal politics. The second issue, which is an area of concern, is the implicit assumptions we had about the institutional nature of government's attitude to open data culture. And again, Sandile touched on this a little earlier. Malawi is no different. My country has an anxiety around open data. It's just there. And a lot of this is because of past experience by mostly academics who have come in and made promises and then have simply disappeared with data. Or in some instances, because I operate in a low resource environment, and when I say low resource environment, I work with local government offices that don't have ink in the printer. That's what I mean. So because we live in I operate in a low resource environment like that, government has an incentive to monetize data. So that comes into almost a philosophical clash with, like myself, I'm an open data advocate. That runs counter to that. But they have a reality where they have to monetize if they are to generate money. And also, there was also a problem of external reluctance from NGOs to collaborate. Massive problem. As much as NGOs claim to, we claim to operate following best practices, what has actually happened from my experience is that because of, I borrowed the term data egos, because of data egos between especially international and local organizations, there's a reluctance to collaborate to collect the same data. I'll give you a very quick example where an organization refused to collaborate with us and we ended up mapping the same location twice in the same year because they didn't want to collaborate. And to make matters worse, because of data egos from the people I was collaborating with at the time as partners, they also wanted to map on their own. So data egos did play into this, which led to a reluctance to collaborate. But also, there was a missed opportunity during the course of the implementation whereby we had another ministry also dealing with WASH data, not talking to the Ministry of Water that had all this data sitting there. So you find that there's as much as we're not sharing data within ourselves as within the ministry and sector, there's also interministerial lack of sharing data as well. So that's a missed opportunity. Lastly, and I'll be very quick, some of the potential opportunities we're looking at, the burning question that remains in my sector is how do we update the existing database? And we're looking to new partnerships to make this happen. So for example, my country has an extensive network of area mechanics. Could we use this existing network to actually update the existing database that we've built? Because at the moment it's sitting with the government and they're working through the internal issues to open that data up, hopefully soon. So the question is, could something like this work, use an existing network of area mechanics to update this database? We don't know. It's something we need to try out. And on that note, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Muti, for that great presentation and explaining more about your country's case study. I think that's a lot of people can relate, and that will hopefully foster some good questions from the audience. So on that note, I would like to hand over the Q&A to Nick.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks. Okay, great. Well, this was a very insightful, very interesting set of presentations and diverse as well, with some similarities across different countries. I think data egos is a concept that more people will remember, and so thank you, Sandile, also for that, and Muti for also revealing again how that comes reappears in different contexts, and I certainly have seen it as well. I just want to, because we don't have a lot of time, we're going to jump straight into some of the questions, and please do feel free, to add additional questions in the comments, or possibly raise your hand if we have time at the end. Then, but just maybe to start off with, I wanted to add, Shefu Rashid from Niger asked a question, and this was, he mentions that, you know, he's a member of RWSN. He'd like to know which organization is the focal point for the WASH Data Initiative and how can I contribute? And how a youth organization in the field can strengthen these initiatives. I think maybe this is a good question for Mutala and RWSN as really a connector on you know, rural WASH data. Mutala, is that, can I ask
Hello,
you
Nick.
to respond to that one?
Yes. So with regards to the question, did you say he's a member of the network or he wants to join?
He is a member of the network, but he wants to know which organization is the focal point for the WASH Data Initiative and how can he contribute? Or how can Shefu contribute? And you know, how does a youth organization in the field help strengthen these initiatives? So maybe you can give some tips or some advice and reflections from your side.
Okay. Thanks very much. So it's an opportunity for Muti to come in also as a member of the Data for Action team. He's a co-lead as well as myself. But just to say that when it comes to the network, we have sub-teams as a whole network. And like I indicated, when we talk about groundwater, it's something of concern that we are trying to address. When you talk about data, it's something of concern that we want to address. And because of that, we have the Data for Action team, which is a sub-team under the whole network. And Eileen just shared a link for people who want to join that particular network. So if you are particularly interested in WASH data issues, then you can subscribe using that link. But Muti, you can add 1 or 2 points to this. Thank you. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you, Mutala, and thank you for the question and the interest. As Mutala has mentioned, you can sign up to becoming a member of the Data for Action group, and we can have a much more intimate conversation around what your needs are, and whether that could actually fit into the Data for Action group. We still have a lot of initiatives coming up during the course of the year, looking at engaging with the membership in a more constructive and sort of, you know, problem-centered way, where we're actually looking at what problems are people actually dealing with and how can we solve that. And I just want to call your attention to Aline, who has just posted in the chat for a link that will take you to where you can actually register. And then, yeah, we can take the conversation forward from there. So see you on the group. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I saw another question that was quite interesting, and I think this one is directed to UASNet and UNIA, who spoke about the platforms that they're using to collect data from all of your members. I was wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about, you know, because let's see, Vasco Bafur Kaye asked, you know, it'd be informative to know what management information systems are in place for rural water supply. And, you know, related to that, and I think you responded in a bit, there was a question from Sandil about, you know, are there any, you know, related language issues with respect to that? I think you addressed the technical literacy and how the Secretariat is training regional coordinators to administer the tool, but what are these management systems, and are there any literacy or language issues?
Yeah, thank you. Really, like I mentioned, we put in so much time. Our monitoring and evaluation department puts in much time to train our members. It's actually because each individual member, each of the 160 civil society organizations has to fill the form individually. So we undertake trainings for the members on how to go about the Kobo tool. It's the Kobo tool that we use. A link is shared to the members. And like I mentioned, they can either use their computer or their phone to fill in that form. So they are trained. The number of trainings are undertaken either at regional level or at national level. And we also have a team at the Secretariat that can always provide, one-on-one trainings for the members to undertake this. When it comes, so that way, because most of all these CSOs are really, they have literate people who provide this information. And yeah, so that's how we address the literacy issue. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Yunia. And I think, it's also really interesting that, this is also about making a tool that's appropriate for your members and taking the time to do that training. I can imagine in some cases, people on the call may be dealing with, having more languages, in their systems. And that may be an interesting discussion to take into the future. I was just wondering, Sandil, maybe we could come back to you and your presentation. Very exciting, everything that you're doing within your department and with all these different provinces and agencies, and you're also building partnerships. And can you give one concrete example on some of the steps that have been taken in that example to build a strong data partnership? And maybe how you addressed, some of these issues around perhaps literacy and language.
No, thanks, Nicholas. It's a difficult one. I think Muti has already touched on some of the issues that exist between national government and other subnational governments, provinces and municipalities. There is of course a sort of technical way of trying to bridge or to establish relationships, but also there's a not so technical way which involves the issues of humility and overexposure from the national side. So at least I come from from local government, so I'm aware of how local government views national government. So that's been very, very helpful, because we've come back. We said this is the data set that we already have at national level that is fed into national government or is coming from national government. What other data sets do you have, and how do you help? How do we then assist you in your planning process? So one of the things that we are trying to do is not to overburden local government and other stakeholders with the reporting process by asking them for data, is to say the data you've already reported on, this is what we've done with it, and we're bringing back to you with absolute humility as well, of saying, it's not that we know everything, but we know all the data that you've sent up, but we also are aware that you go through a lot of pain to report to national government because there is a legislative requirement and obligation for you to report. So, but when we do that to local municipalities and other provincial or national government departments, we never go and ask for the data. We ask, how do we support you with utilizing your data to report better? And I think the mistake that a lot of people have done in the past, maybe before me, is to always go to either other national government departments or local municipalities and say, give us the data. But why should we give you the data? The so what question comes up, right? We already are reporting in many other spaces. How do we, how are you coming to sort out our situation? So what we've done is that, because we have the technical capacity, we go and say, how do we assist you to report on your data quicker and faster without having to run Excel tables, run queries on your database every time you are asked to report, right? So we'll pull it and we'll clean it, and we'll find that there's a whole lot of challenges with the quality of the data. Then we expose those challenges so that they can resolve them. Then we build a simple dashboard that allows them to report on the go. So we find that it has worked quite a lot because it's asking what can we do for people, and we find it easier in most instances that the department will say, oh, do you mind them connecting live to our database, right? Instead, so that we don't have to always depend, you don't have to depend on us sending you a dump of a data. It can update automatically. So I think it's a strategic question. And a strategic response, the same as the issue of data egos, which needs to be unpacked as well. How do you strategically respond to it? So we're trying to build partnerships in a very strategic way that, of course, is centered around the issue of humility, especially at national government, because you only are humble when you have power. When you don't have power, you're not humble, you're just powerless. Yeah. It's also different. So at national level, because there's a lot of power to subpoena and tell, not subpoena per se, but to tell national government, local government what to do, or other municipality provinces what to do, it's easier to bully. So we flip the script and saying, we don't know as much as you do because you're on the ground. Can we do it better? How do we do it better in terms of the data that we do? So I think these are some of the examples of what we've done, Nicholas, and I'm sure there's better examples elsewhere, but that's what we do.
That's really powerful, Sandile, and thanks so much for outlining, you know, this process and how you make that flip. So I just want to finish because we have 1 minute left, and I thought, you know, last time we ended the webinar nicely, asking everyone to summarize in one sentence, you know, the future of WASH innovation. I'd like to ask, you know, what in one sentence, maybe if we could go to each speaker and ask, what do future WASH data partnerships look like? Is there anything different? One sentence. And I'll just go through the order I have on the website here of everybody's names. So it's not the same order we started in, but yeah. Executive Director Yunia Muzazi.
Yeah. Well, I really think with AI, maybe we may have hope that there'll be more accessibility to data, because in spite of having shared the example from Uganda, we still have a challenge, like many other speakers have mentioned, of stakeholders being, you know, not really wanting to release their data. So hopefully with AI, hopefully with more technology improvements, for the people who are looking for the data, or those who are mandated like us to coordinate that data, we may be able to easily have access to the data that we need to put together for better targeting of those in need. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Dr. Sandile Bata.
Data sitting with one person, one entity is as good as useless. If it's not shared, that data is not adding value. You might as well not collect it. So that's my parting shot. So that, of course, talks to the issue of ensuring that you build partnerships that are based on mutual respect and sharing and so forth. But yeah, otherwise, if it's not shared, then it doesn't make sense. Thanks.
Very powerful. Thanks. Fiona, go.
So I think I'm also in the same lines here, but together, if we're more aligned and we drop our egos, just to use the expression that's been used today, we'll be more powerful and we're going to make more progress. So let's stick together. Thanks.
Great post-SDG agenda. Okay, Mutala Abdul Mumin.
Yes. Just to say that we have come to the realization that you can't do it alone. Whatever work we have to do, we need each other. We need to rely on each other, especially when it comes to data. And so this is just the beginning. We have to work together to be able to achieve whatever we wish to achieve as a sector, as far as delivery of WASH services is concerned. And so I am committed to sharing whatever data I generate as a practitioner, and I'm sure you are all committed to. Thank you.
Thank you. What a beautiful commitment. So Muti Nelema, finally.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, looking at my context and looking at the importance of the Ministry of Water when it comes to the utilization of WASH data, I think that the future of partnerships needs to evolve. Because at the moment, NGOs are held at arm's length, private sector is held at arm's length, and the government sort of is isolated from everyone else, isolates itself from everyone else. So I feel there has to be an evolution of partnerships where there has to be a lot more trust built, because I find that for the longest time, I think our assumption has been that we need data to help make our state institutions more effective, but actually we need to help our state institutions be more effective so that they can make the decisions they need to make. But for us to do that, there has to be more openness and trust. And that's going to take a long time. And we need to invest as much time in that as we do in data collection, building that relationship so that we are more open to strengthening the system truly, rather than give it lip service. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Muti. More openness and trust, giving it more time. I think this is a great way to round off. I want to thank everyone for taking part and everybody for sticking in there. We still have 35 people on the call. Very much appreciated. This was an exciting discussion and our second webinar as WashWeb. So please do join us in our next event, which will be hosted both online and at the Stockholm World Water Week. So I'll hand over to you, Muriel, to close up in case there's anything else to say. I want to thank everybody for taking part.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick. Thank you to all our speakers today. We really, really appreciate it. Just a quick last word from me. If you want to keep getting updates from WashWeb, feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. You'll get an email from us after this webinar with the link to the slides and also the recording. And I'm sending some of our social links in the chat right now in case you would like to check those out. So thanks so much, everyone, and hope to see you either in Stockholm online, next webinar, or at something else. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.